Close your eyes and imagine. What if the things in life that cause us the greatest pain, the things that bring us grief, are challenges? Challenges designed to help us grow, to ultimately become what we were always meant to be. We feel like we've been buried, but what if, like a seed, we've been planted? And having been planted, we grow to become a mighty tree. Now, open your eyes. Open your eyes to this way of viewing life. Come with me as we explore your true, infinite, eternal nature. This is Grief to Growth, and I am your host, Brian Smith. Hey there, and welcome to Grief to Growth. I'm your host, Brian Smith, and whether you're tuning in for the first time or you've been on this journey with me for a while, I'm so glad that you're here. This podcast is all about navigating the challenges of life, finding deeper meaning, and understanding who we are, where we come from, and why we're here, and also where we're going. Today, we've got a truly insightful guest, someone I'm really excited to talk to. He's dedicated his life to exploring the depths of self-awareness, of mindfulness, and emotional intelligence, all the things that we talk about here. Stephen Schettini is a former Buddhist monk. He's an accomplished author and a mindfulness teacher. His books, The Novice, Why I Became a Buddhist Monk, Why I Quit, and What I Learned, and It Begins with Silence, The Art of Mindful Reflection, offer profound insights into personal transformation, self-discovery, and the art of letting go. He also leads Mindfulness Live, a 3 times a week Zoom class, helping people develop practical mindfulness skills. In this episode, Stephen and I will dive deep into some fascinating and timely topics. How can we stay sane in a world filled with bad news and misinformation? What practical mindfulness tools can we use to reduce stress and anxiety? And how does self-knowledge lead to true inner peace? We'll also explore the lessons he learned from monastic life and how the science of mindfulness aligns with the wisdom of Buddhism. So if you're looking for ways to cultivate a sense of calm, clarity, and purpose in a chaotic world, I think this conversation is going to be for you. So stay tuned, and don't forget to join us at the discussion at grieftogrowth.com/community afterward, where you can connect with other listeners and with me. So with that, I'd like to welcome Stephen Schettini.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks for that introduction. Very generous. It's pronounced, everyone gets this wrong, but it's actually pronounced Schettini.
I knew I should have asked that before we
Don't,
started, and it is really interesting. Some people pronounce their last names, quote, correctly, and some people don't. So I
yeah,
should have asked you that. I
yeah.
apologize.
I'm always unsure whether I should remind people or not, but I think it's better for
I
people
think you
to.
should. Yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely think you did.
And it
So
is counterintuitive anyway. So,
it's Italian, right? So
yeah,
it makes sense.
yeah.
So Stephen, I'm really curious about people who join the monastic life. It's something that some of us have considered. I considered it at one time. It was like, I don't think I'm ready to do this. What made you decide to do that?
Oh boy. What made me decide? Well, I mean, there's the real reasons, the real motives, which are largely unconscious and sort of, accumulated over years, childhood and adolescence. And then there are the rationalizations, the reasons that we come up with. I did it because I thought it was a great idea, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it wasn't that simple. Um, let me just fast forward a little bit to when I first met my wife, Carolyn, my present wife, which was 20 years after the monastery. And I was accustomed at that point to people asking me, so what was it like? And it must have been so interesting. And wow, what did you learn?
Hmm.
And she looked at me and she said, you went into a monastery when you were 22? What was wrong with you? So that was when I started to look back on those monastic years and on my decision to become a monk with new eyes, with far more objective eyes. And I started to, she's got a point here. That's pretty weird. A young man in his 20s takes a vow of celibacy. Something's wrong.
Hmm.
So yeah, I grew up angry. I was frustrated. I had attention deficit without knowing that I had it or what it meant. I didn't do well at school. Everyone said I was intelligent, but you know, um, my family didn't really understand me, and I didn't understand them. And I think those were the inner motives.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
And then I went to university, I studied social science for 4 years, and I had hoped by going to school that I would get an education. And I was thinking in very old-fashioned terms. I was raised in England uh, just after the war. The whole idea of a classical education was still there. And I thought if I went to university, I would learn how to live, how to think, how to be. And of course, what I did learn was how to pass examinations.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and it didn't do anything for me. I felt this was going nowhere. And it was at that point, shortly before I completed my degree, that I left and I hitchhiked to India. And it wasn't a straight line. I got into a lot of trouble on the way with drugs, among other things. But I did land up in Dharamsala in northwest India in the newly formed Tibetan community in Dharamsala, where
Hmm.
the Dalai Lama lived. And they were very welcoming. They had um, knowledge and information and insights and culture that I craved like a starving man. I really wanted it because I'd left everything behind. I had no faith in what I'd left behind. But this gave me a new belonging and a new beginning and a sense of belonging.
Hmm.
So I joined up and I was there for 8 years. And then I went through another revolution. We'll talk
Yeah.
about it.
So during those 8 years, what was it like for you? What did you feel like you learned from that?
Um, I learned a lot of stuff. Most of the good part of that stuff didn't really take effect until afterwards.
Hmm.
It took me years to sort through it and realize what was valuable and what was just sort of window dressing. Um, but what I learned in those years were the basics: how to concentrate. Um, I learned about mind, the Buddhist concept of psychology, which is all about mental factors such as empathy, compassion, and then the other ones, of course, greed and anger. And so I was looking into the mind and I was not just studying it in the books, but comparing what I get in the books with observation, because that's what meditation is, really.
Hmm.
It's a way to observe yourself from the inside and what you see. I mean, scientists would say, well, that's not scientific, it's totally subjective, which is true, but scientists cannot see what I'm thinking.
Exactly. Yeah.
They can't see what I'm feeling. And
Exactly.
they're not able to trace that connection between the feelings that trigger me and the behavior that results. And that's the pivot, that's the crux where change and transformation happens or doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really an important distinction you made there, and it's really interesting when we tend to discount things that we say are not scientific, but science is about observation. And as you said, I think Buddhism is very scientific in that sense because it's all about observation. And just because we can't measure it with an instrument doesn't mean it's not real. In fact, I argue the only thing that is real is what we perceive. If we don't perceive it, it's not real to us.
Well, yeah. We live with our perceptions, whether they're real or not.
Yeah.
And perception can get pretty twisted, as we see nowadays. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because I think in our society, and I love what you said about that classical education, because we don't teach people how to live. We don't teach people in this country, at least, practical things like how to budget your money, or even stuff like that. We teach these things that are not really relevant, but we especially don't teach like how to go within. And I
Mhm.
always say, as I said in my introduction, I always say we I think we've forgotten who we are, why we're here, where we're going, and what we're supposed to be doing. And we don't teach that in most of our formal education.
Well, some people are beginning to teach mindfulness in schools. That's great. It should be in primary school. It
I
should be in
completely agree.
preschool because
Yeah.
kids just take to it. They know how to do it better than we do.
Yeah.
Mindfulness is the original state of mind. When you come into this world with no knowledge, no experience, nothing, not even language, all you have is your awareness.
Hmm.
We depend on that. So kids are much closer to that and they relate to it and it's fun. They don't see it as I've got to meditate now. It's fun.
Yeah.
It's cheesy, and that's the way it should be. So, yeah, I think we need that sort of education. While we're on the topic, I would like to see some other things introduced into early education, such as how to create a relationship, how to raise children. You know,
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
why don't we teach this stuff?
Yeah, I agree with you on that, and it's
Mhm.
interesting, in our society again. You're from England and you live in Canada now. I'm an American. I've only ever lived here, and yeah, there is a drive for people to teach mindfulness, but then we also have a lot of fundamentalists here who say you're teaching another religion,
Yeah,
and we don't want you teaching this religion. So I always thought it's interesting because I've studied Buddhism a little bit. Do you consider Buddhism to be a religion?
well, it can be. Yeah.
Okay,
If you
yeah.
go to any Buddhist country in Thailand or Tibet, you walk into a monastery and you see the way people are behaving. They're on their knees, they're praying, they're hoping for the best. That's a religion.
Yeah.
But you can also treat it as a science and get some really powerful and creative insights from it as well. You
Hmm.
don't have to believe. I think what the Buddha taught was definitely not a religion.
I agree. Yeah.
I think what happened after the Buddha died was the creation of a religion.
That's the way I perceive it as well.
Yeah, yeah,
I think the Buddha, I think Jesus would say he wasn't teaching religion. He
yeah,
would say, I'm just teaching the way things are.
yeah.
And yeah, so there is this crossover because as Buddhism has moved into different cultures, it's been adapted and changed. But I guess my point was mindfulness is not a religious thing. And so I think people are again scared of that sitting quietly. What's going to happen? So let's explain to people. We've been using this word mindfulness. What does mindfulness really mean?
Mindfulness has come to be an all-encompassing word now, like spirituality. It's
Mm,
sort of you don't know what the other person thinks when you say the word, you know.
hmm
But essentially, the way I was trained, mindfulness is a mental factor. It's a state of mind. And in fact, we often compare it to a muscle. If you practice it, it'll get strong. And when you stop practicing, it weakens again. And it's really about paying attention to reality. And so reality only happens now in the present moment. The past is gone, the future is not here, reality is right here. And our preoccupations are mostly with the past, regrets, or figuring out what we've done, trying to learn from it, or getting stuck in those old mental patterns. And the other side, we're looking at the future, trying to, anchor ourselves, reach goals, but also protect ourselves. And we don't spend a lot of time in the present moment. So when we do, we're in touch with a much more um, substantial world, and it's moving very fast, and everything is changing. And that recognition and that close connection to the reality that everything is changing, it's humbling, and it's a reminder that life doesn't go on forever. We're not going to be here forever. Um, there are certain priorities in life that you have to respect,
mm,
and that undermines the sense of entitlement and all that negativity that really messes up our lives. So that's really the core of mindfulness, is to and it teaches you, of course, to understand yourself, not as a story, not I was born here and I did that and I became this, but this is how I'm reacting now in this situation. I'm with this horrible, awful person right now, and he's triggering me like crazy. How am I responding to that? What's going on inside me? And of course, that's very hard because we're normally busy trying to defend our little egos from this
hmm
nasty person. But instead of that, if you can use it as a scientific exercise, then that's the source of real insight.
Yeah.
It's not easy. You got to
Yeah.
practice.
Yeah, exactly. I think there is that practice that we have to do. So you went into the monastery and you were I believe you said you were angry and you were maybe confused. Like what is this? So you started practicing mindfulness over those 8 years and you did practice it. What is it that made you decide, okay, this is not for me anymore. It's time for me to move on and do the next thing.
Short answer is I was trained to be a teacher. The Tibetans were scared at that point. They were losing their culture. Their
Mm,
country had been invaded, taken over, monastery shut down. They wanted to share all that they had so that somebody else would, and so that we would continue the tradition. And they thought that this, and we thought that this was a huge transformation in the world, that finally this rational way of what do I call it? Spirituality, I suppose, was coming to the West and it was going to, blossom. And we were the new teachers of all this. But at the end of the 8 years, when I was ready to teach and I started teaching, it was made very clear to me that I should be teaching the Tibetan way. And the Tibetan way is, yes, it's partly scientific Buddhism, but yes, it's also partly religious
mm,
Buddhism. And very hard to swallow stuff. You have to teach reincarnation. You you have to teach about these invisible demons.
mm, mm,
And I said, well, I suppose I could, but I'm going back west and they're just not going to swallow this. And they're not interested in that. So that raised the question for me. So what here is important and what is not?
mhm.
And of course, for my teachers, everything was equally important.
Yeah.
So that was a very difficult process. And that's really, I had to detach myself from my teachers, from that tradition, and I could no longer be there with them because it wasn't fair, it wasn't real. So I went solo.
Yeah, well, that kind of gets us back to again the question I asked you about is Buddhism religion? And I love that your answer is like it could be, right?
Yeah,
So, and we've seen this in other religions or traditions as they've come into a culture, and the culture changes them to adapt them, and then says, okay, well, now this is all equally important. You have to teach all this stuff, and so that's why I think there is some confusion from people like okay, if I meditate, then I have to be into reincarnation and I have to be into these invisible demons and stuff like that. I think what we can do though, we can strip that part out of it, the mindfulness and the study of ourselves, and we can do that without some of the other stuff.
I think we can, but it's not easy because you're pretty much left on your own. You have to depend
Hmm.
on yourself. And this sort of path, this the spiritual path, an inner path, it requires support because
Yeah.
everything in the world is working against it. We live in an ultra materialistic world.
Yeah.
Um, it's not just capitalism, it's money. Money is everything. Everything is quantified into money. And to step back from that, which most people really do want to do,
Hmm.
it's very hard because there's no support unless you join a community. That's the hard part. And I couldn't belong to that community. And many people can no longer be there. They read about Jesus and they love him. Jesus is a hero. I mean, Jesus is cool. He's amazing. The Sermon on the Mount is incredible.
Hmm.
But you have to swallow all that other stuff in order to get some benefit from that.
Yeah.
That's the story of the religious institution. And of course, their job is to keep their membership and grow their membership. So I hate to use the word, but the word is marketing. They're
Yeah.
constantly trying to sell and reinforce and keep everything together, keep a solid body of information, which is coherent, which people can rely on, which makes people feel safe. And I think that's the big mistake of religion.
Well, that
Um,
happens, yeah, and that happens so much everywhere. I have a really good friend. His name is Kelvin Chen, and he studied transcendental meditation like in the 70s, and was a worldwide teacher of that and everything. And then it started to get politicized and stuff, and he had to step away from that. So that this happens. This is people. I think this is human nature.
yeah.
We want to institutionalize things. We want to say you have to teach it this way. How have you found community since then, since you left the monastery?
Well, I didn't find, I had to make it.
Mm,
The transition from the monastery was the hardest time of my life, without question. When I first became a monk, when I first was embraced by the Tibetans, I took it all. I swallowed it all. And part of that is this. First of all, you're dealing with limitless, endless lifetimes. So, we're no longer three score and ten. We're now looking at vast, you know, distances of time.
Hmm.
Um, and on top of that, the work, the goal is to become fully enlightened in order to bring all other sentient beings in the universe into an equal state of enlightenment, which is like, it's this huge, incredible thing that, I'm going to transform the universe. I'm going to be part of this. So it's very heady. And 8 years of that, well, probably 6 years of that. And then I started to question it at about year seven. Um, then I had to let go of all that. And
Mm.
I was just another guy on the street and trying to make a living, trying to survive, no support system. It was really hard, but that's what forced me to really put all that I'd learned through that sieve and see what was really valuable. So it was a good experience for me. I wouldn't want to do it again though.
I would imagine it'd be very difficult. I mean,
Mm, mm,
that I would imagine that that become your like your identity. I'm a Buddhist monk, and I'm a part of this. I'm part of this thing, and walking away from that is difficult. Again, any religion. I can speak from a Christian point of view. I was raised in the church,
mm,
and didn't really ever swallow all of that. Some of it was like it doesn't make any sense to me, but they said you have to believe it, so I kind of did for as long as I could. But then
mhm.
you get to that point where it's like, okay, I have to walk away from this, and my grandfather was my pastor. So it was like, and my whole
Oh
family.
my,
So it's like when you say, it's even to this day when I say I'm no longer a Christian, it's just kind of like there's like little like feeling in my chest, like that you walked away from that.
yeah.
So I know that can be difficult, but then it's like there's so much good. So as you said, you have to sort through and figure out what do I take with me and what do I leave behind.
So in order to do that, guess who I went to? I went to the Buddha.
Hmm.
So, if you know anything about Buddhism, you'll know it's like any other religion. There are thousands of different sects and ways of thinking, and some of them are contradictory, and some of them have gone to war against each other, which surprises people.
Yeah.
But there are two main lineages. There's Northern Buddhism and Southern Buddhism. So, Southern Buddhism is really based on the very earliest scriptures. And Northern Buddhism is based on mainly on the scriptures of Nagarjuna, who's known as the second Buddha, who was about 600 years later.
Hmm.
And the Northern tradition is much, much more elaborate, symbolic, uh, much more dressed up. And you don't actually hear much about the life of the Buddha, except in very supernatural ways. I mean, you get a story where the Buddha is simultaneously appearing in different places, teaching different people. He's traveling across the continent in a matter of seconds. He sees past lives and future lives of individuals. Whereas when you go to Southern Buddhism and you study the Buddha, he talks about how training your mind is like the work of a fletcher, a person who makes arrows, and how he makes sure that the mind is straight and that he's pointing in the right direction. So he's much more metaphorical. He's much more real. He's someone you can relate to.
Hmm.
So I got very much after I left the monastery, I got much more into the story of the Buddha himself, um, which I'm still studying, which I still find fascinating, which I'm still writing about.
Hmm.
And what I realized was that he had a much simpler message than the message that the Tibetans had been teaching me. And it really comes down to this is a path of self-reliance. And you really enter the path. The sign that you've entered the path is when you're no longer dependent on doctrines and teachers.
Hmm.
And that upended everything I'd believed about how Buddhism was supposed to work. And it
Yeah.
gave me permission to think for myself.
Yeah.
And that's when it really started to take off for me. And that's when I started all that stuff that I learned in the monastery that we were talking about at the outset. That's when I started to really understand what was working and what was not.
It's really interesting. That reminds me of something Jesus said. Like he said, don't call no man father. It's like stop
Yeah.
looking to other people. So I love that. You, like you said, that's kind of where you're kind of coming into your own, where you can become self-resilient, which may sound contradictory to the fact that we also have to find community in order to thrive, because we are going against the culture.
Yeah. It does, it sounds contradictory in words, but the reality is that no matter what you do, without support, you're not going to go very far.
Yeah.
We're profoundly social being. I mean, you can't even imagine what it would be like to be a human without being part of society. We'd have no language, we'd have no way of thinking. It just wouldn't make sense. Um, we need each other. We are each other. We form our own identities through the eyes of others.
Hmm.
It's and yet I'm speaking as somebody who tried desperately to get away from society and from people, and all I wanted to do was be alone. That's how I ended up in a hut in North Pakistan with shooting morphine. This was shortly before I met the Tibetans, and that
Hmm.
was where that way of thinking led me.
Yeah.
So I realized that you have to embrace society, you have to be connected to other people, and you have to be open to other people if you want to be open to yourself.
I agree. And I think that's one of the problems in our society today is that even though we're surrounded by other people, there is an epidemic of loneliness.
Yeah.
There's an epidemic of people feeling not connected, drifting, wondering, who am I? All these things we're talking about. Where am I going? Why am I here?
And low self-esteem.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't deserve it anyway, so it doesn't matter. Yeah.
So I know in your second book, you talk about, it's titled "It Begins with Silence: The Art of Mindful Reflection." Now, when I try to talk to people about mindfulness, I get a lot of this. I can't meditate. You don't understand. When I sit down, my mind just goes all over the place. I can't stop it. I'm sure you've heard this too. So, how
Okay.
do you respond to that?
Um, how do I respond to that? Yeah, it's a big question. Well, the first thing is for people to understand that what is insight? Okay. I started meditating because I wanted to control my mind. My mind was a mess and I need control. Okay, so I went in with this very militaristic attitude.
Right.
Um, and of course, all it gives you is a headache, really, and frustration. And I do get that a lot from people. I'm no good at this. I'm not going to be any good. And I blame teachers. Okay. You go to a meditation course, you sit down and they say, okay, now take a breath and empty your mind of thoughts. So, okay, I'll empty my mind, but I can't. I'm thinking now. Well, emptying my mind is a thought. So you get confused and you have this conversation with yourself and it's exactly the opposite of what you expect. And it's exactly the opposite of what's being asked of you.
Hmm.
And so you think, well, I'm no good at this. And the first thing I remind people is, well, I'm no good at that either. And nobody on this planet is good at that. Okay. It's the wrong instruction.
Yeah.
Okay. The idea is to sit there and watch your mind and see what happens. Be detached. Um, drop your expectations, especially the expectation that I'm going to sit down and focus my mind and everything's going to be groovy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not going to happen. Just whatever happens, that's cool. You see it. I hate myself. Fine. I see that thought. I hate myself. Okay. I'm no good at it. Fine. I see that thought. I'm no good at this. That's what you're looking at. And it's tricky. People look at me and they sort of shake their, no, I just want, give me a simple instruction.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
what can I, give me the face of a Buddha. I can concentrate on that. Well, you can try, yeah, but that's not really going to work. So on the one hand, you've got teachers telling you to empty your mind of thoughts or to do something or another that's not really going to happen.
Hmm.
And on the other hand, you've got the expectation that I'm going to sit down and meditate and it's going to free me from something or another, my thoughts at least. And neither of those comes true. In the end, what you're faced with is mental confusion
Yeah.
and rapidly changing thoughts and emotions that you can't keep up with, not knowing how you feel. I mean, you ask people, so how do you actually feel now? And many people go, oh, they have to think about it. And sometimes people will say, well, I don't really have feelings,
Hmm. Yeah.
and um, that's impossible. Every experience feels like something. Every experience feels like something. So what I try to tell people is, look, when you look in your mind and you get frustrated because you can't focus and you can't concentrate, that is insight. That's your very first insight. You're building your path based on that. That
Mm.
is the first step. So, what is my path? Well, look down, look at your feet. Where are they? That's your path. And again, it sort of confuses people. Can you give me a clearer answer than that? No, I can't. Only
Yeah.
you can see that. I can't see it. So that's where it begins. And of course, some people face the challenge and some people don't. And in fact, I was when I was reviewing your website and you earlier this morning, I mean, I've seen it before, but I wanted to remind myself. And I looked at your title, Grief to Growth, and it reminded me of something that I've learned that because a lot of people will come up to me after a meditation course and say, look, Stephen, this was fantastic. I really loved it. And could you speak to my husband? Do you think you could convince him to come to the next one? Most of the people are women, in fact. So
Yes. Yeah.
this is the one thing I can't do. No, I cannot give somebody motivation. That has to come from them.
Hmm.
And what motivates people, I hate to say it, it's a kick in the teeth.
It is.
Grief will, if you're willing, produce growth. It doesn't do it automatically.
Yes.
But that's the point. It's on the same page. Something has to happen that makes us want that. For me, it was my anger. For you, it's the loss of your daughter. Um, of people just losing their job, losing their marriage, whatever. But that's an opportunity to move forward. It starts in suffering.
Well,
And that was the Buddhist message. Sorry?
speaking of suffering, before we started recording, we were talking about the fact that you live in Canada and I live in the US, and we're recording this on March 4th, 2025, and we're going through some very trying times. We're going through a lot of uncertainty. We're going through, the news seems to be going at an incredible pace. I mean, like you wake up one morning and you're like, what happened yesterday? Um, how can mindfulness help us as we go through these times to anchor ourselves somehow?
Well, getting back to the idea that mindfulness doesn't operate in a vacuum, um, I would add, see, mindfulness is, we talk about it in terms of the present moment, and it's something very immediate and it's something about experience, but there's also a bigger picture. It's mindfulness is something that happens in your mind, in your perceptions. And mindfulness in Buddhism is only one aspect of the Eightfold Path. There are seven other things.
Hmm.
So we're looking at the bigger picture. And I think one thing which is really helpful for me is a knowledge of history, to look back and see, oh, this stuff's happened before.
Yeah.
Um, this happened in Rome. The Romans built this extraordinary, vast civilization. And if you lived in Rome in the second or third century, you would think that this is going to go on forever. This will can't possibly change. So that reminder of impermanence, that reminder that of hubris, the
Hmm.
more we get, the stronger we become, the more entitled we are, then the more out of touch with reality. And eventually it all collapses like a house of cards. So just that, it puts it in perspective. And I don't feel like the whole world is falling apart. I feel like the whole world is still turning the way it's always turned. And
Hmm.
yes, we're going through a bad period, but good periods lead to bad and bad lead back to good. And that's the way of the world. So it
Hmm.
gives you a context, it gives you a bigger picture to look at than just the immediate horror of each daily news cycle. It's
Yeah. Well,
uh,
you
um,
mentioned we talked about grief, And grief is not necessarily loss of a person. It could be the loss of anything, loss of identity, loss of a job, a marriage, whatever. The belief in your what your country represented. That could be a grief event.
Yeah.
So, but what we also said is, if we allow it, this can lead to growth, and this is on a personal level and on a collective level.
Yeah. Coming together is a big deal. Um, in mindfulness circles, a lot of people are looking, and meditation circles and spiritual circles in general, a lot of people are looking for inner peace.
Hmm.
And to them, that's something very, it's an escape from outer uh, aggression or outer war, if you want. But that sort of inner peace is not really realistic or possible. There's no inner peace without outer peace. So I think mindfulness has to become also a social activity.
Hmm.
We work with others to foster a mindful culture as much as we can, with kindness and compassion. We replace the bottom line of pure profits with, yeah, we have to be able to sustain these things, but we're doing it for people, not just for money and for the stock market. So I think there is a large movement. There are lots of people who want to buy into that, and they're having a lot of difficulty right now, but we need to stay together. We need to join together and remind ourselves that we're not alone, remind other people, especially the most venal people in our culture right now, that they don't have a free pass, that there's a lot of opposition, that they will one day lose power and they'll be replaced. And we
Yeah.
need to keep up that momentum. We need to remind each other of it and we need to believe in it. And we can do that by learning to sit quietly and speak rationally and observe clearly what's going on without getting too scared and too anxious. We've got to keep our wits.
I think what you said, there's that balance. I mean, you might feel like running off and joining a monastery now. I know some people want to, I want to turn the news off. I don't want to hear about this. So there is a facing reality, but also saying I'm going to keep my inner peace. And I love what you said about community as well. It's interesting because again, you're in Canada, I'm in the U.S. You and I have zero animosity against each other, and we're seeing our governments, out of control. I'll take the blame. Our government out of control. There's a large contingent in this country that supports Ukraine, for example, and so as I talk to Ukrainian people, I'm like, yeah, I'm with you. So we can remind ourselves that we are all connected, and I think the majority of us want to be connected. I think it's a minority that wants to keep us divided.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think President Biden was quite right when he said that what was going to come up was an oligarchy. You got a few massively wealthy people controlling everything and basically trying to disenfranchise the rest of society.
Hmm.
Um, and that's not going to work. Any economist will tell you it's not going to work. You can't just take the money and ignore the market. We need to be able to buy stuff and we want to be able to participate and there has to be some movement and we need to have a voice.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, we really have to speak up. This is a time to not. And I really appreciate you even asking me the question because a lot of podcasts is just no, no, we don't go there. We're spiritual. We don't talk about politics. We don't want to get. I don't think that's feasible. Like I said before, without outer peace, there's no inner peace.
I actually have been struggling with this lately because as someone who has a spiritual podcast, and I want to be respectful to all faiths and
Mhm.
political views and everything, but there also becomes a point of morality. There
Yeah.
also becomes a point of, spirituality. And as we talked about, I think we have responsibility to each other as human beings. And I believe our politics reflects our morality. Now, I have no problems with anybody of any party anywhere, but I do have problems with people that say we don't care about other people. And what we're going through right now, just a real small example, United States, we've said, okay, USAID, we give all this money to other people around the world, and Some people look at what do we get for that? We're spending money. We need to get a return on that. What do we get? And so people say, oh, well, they don't give us anything back monetarily, but we get soft power, we get influence. Okay, well, that's something. But what about just doing it because they're human beings and they need it and we have it? Whatever happened to that? Because it's still viewing everything through a transactional lens. So I can't keep that separated when I see, my country saying we've got all this stuff and we're going to let people starve. That's to me, that's immoral.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's politics and I mean, a lot of Republicans will tell you, Donald Trump is not a Republican.
Yeah,
He doesn't have a political bone in his body.
yeah.
That's what I think.
This is not a, yeah. That's what I'm saying.
It's not about politics.
This is not about politics. This
No.
is not about Republican or Democrat. This is about what are we doing as people on the planet.
Yeah.
And I think we can hopefully transcend politics as we come together and say we want to do the right things.
Mm.
So I know you offer some things that are practical for people because one of the things I like to do, I love talking high level stuff. I love talking, you know, uh, 30,000 foot level, but let's bring it down to the ground. What can people do? And you offer a Zoom thing that people can join, right?
Yeah. After years of teaching, I was teaching in Montreal for about 20 years in venues, physical classes and things. And I teach a 10-week or 12-week course 2 or 3 times a year. And at the end of that course, people come to me and say, well, what next? Well, we got another course coming up in a few weeks. But I realized that wasn't enough.
Mm,
And I realized after all this teaching, years and years, and all this studying that I've done, that what's really the hard part? Is it the conception of madhyamika or the idea of emptiness? No, it's not. The hard part is sitting down every day and doing it. That's the hard part. Okay. Well, I could, but I'm busy now and I've got this thing to do and I'll do it tomorrow. And it's always tomorrow. It's the easiest thing in the world. And that's also the message I got from so many of my students is how do I keep this up?
mm,
So I decided, and this happened at the beginning of the pandemic, or actually a little after the pandemic, that I realized what I need to offer is not high level courses, do that too, but what I really need to offer is continuity and
mm,
support. So 3 times a week. So only half an hour each class. 3 times a week, you come and sit. If you can't, then you listen to the recording. But you've got that structure in your
yeah.
life. And most people who meditate are the only person in their home who does. So they
Hmm.
don't get any support there.
Hmm.
There are some couples, but it's pretty unusual.
Yeah.
It's meditating is unusual. Most people, like you say, they're just scared of the silence. They're
Yeah.
scared of of what they find in there because it's not pretty.
Yeah.
And it's not flattering either. So you've got to come to terms with that. And without that support, without knowing that other people are going through it too, without knowing that other people have the same challenges as you do, then you become disillusioned. Your practice just weakens and eventually loses power, loses momentum. So that's what this is all about, momentum. And we meet each week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It's 10 minutes reflection, 10-minute discourse, another 10-minute meditation at the end. And then there's a little chat sometimes afterwards, and people get to know each other. And it's a commitment. Not many people are ready for that commitment. Once they join, it's great because you see the growth. They're doing it regularly. And some days are good and some days are bad, but it doesn't stop them.
Yeah, I love that. Strategy structure, I think is very important. It's something that I've struggled with myself. I practiced meditation for I don't know how many years now, and it would come and go and ebb and flow. And I found an app a few years ago called Insight Timer,
Yeah.
and I use that. It gives me reminders to meditate. It keeps track of my daily streaks. I love having, the streaks. And I took a challenge to meditate 365 days in a row, and I
Cool.
did it. And I ended up doing it for like 4 years
Wow.
because I did it for a year, and then I fell off. Find a way, whether it's joining the Zoom, which sounds like a great thing because that gives you commitment and community
Yeah.
and accountability to an outside person can be very helpful because
Mm,
it's really, really easy to say, I'm too busy to meditate today. I'll do it tomorrow.
mm,
So what I do is I put it on my calendar. I have it on my calendar for twice a day. I do once in the morning and once in the afternoon. Now this morning I was busy. I had the podcast with you, but as soon as we get off of here, I will do my morning meditation. I tell people it's like brushing your teeth. You don't skip days of brushing your teeth. So it's really important. You have to make it a priority, I guess, is what it comes down to.
mm. Yeah. And it's not necessarily very sexy, It's not like studying Tibetan Buddhism and wow. And it's pretty plain bread and butter stuff.
Yeah,
You see yourself messing up and your mind swirling um but as you get to know it, what you're doing is you're getting to know yourself in real time
yeah.
and your reactivity.
Yeah, and people have to understand I don't like using these terms, but there are good days and bad days. There's some days I'll sit in meditation and that the 20 minutes will just like fly by and I feel really deep peace. And it's like, oh, wow, I didn't even realize I was there for 20. And other days I'm 2 minutes in, I'm like, I've got so much stuff to do. Why am I sitting here? And, I'm peeking at the clock. I still have those days too.
And most people assume that, well, the first meditation was good and the second one was bad.
Right.
That's not true. That second day when your mind was all over the place and you were distracted and you couldn't sit still and you feel, "Ugh," that's insight. You're seeing the way you behave. You're seeing the way you react to this situation. You have expectations there. Otherwise, you
Yeah.
wouldn't be frustrated. So what are the expectations? That's how we learn. That's how we change. If you don't get your finger on what you're doing wrong, you can't stop doing it. You got
Yeah.
to see it.
I'm
Yeah.
glad we're having this conversation because I think it's really important for people to understand. Because again, I talked to people when I first started meditating. I was out to lunch with these guys and I said, yeah, and they're both highly successful people, highly driven, and you're like, I couldn't sit for 5 minutes. I couldn't do it. I'm
Yeah.
like, just do it. Just set a timer and sit for 5 minutes. It doesn't matter what happens.
Well, the highly driven people are the ones who are least likely to do it,
Right.
who have the
Exactly.
greatest difficulty. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the thing. They want to do stuff. They want to be able to see it and count it and measure it. And you can't do that with mindfulness.
Yeah, yeah, again, I think it really helps for us to tell people that because again, they think, "Oh, you've been meditating this so long; it must be easy for you," and you just sit and your mind turns off, and that's not the way it works.
No, not at all. Not at all. But that's the illusion. I mean, because our idea of knowledge and of studying and of furthering ourselves is all based on this idea of accumulating more information.
Mm,
Okay. And mindfulness, among other things, is a process of unlearning. That's really the key thing that we're doing. We're recognizing our own mental patterns. We're seeing how they're triggered by certain events. And then we're loosening that connection so that instead of reacting, we take a step back and watch things. So we're letting go of behaviors and things that we know in order to look with new eyes.
hmm
And that's very counterintuitive. And the more education you've had, the more uh, busy you are mentally in your life, the harder that is to do.
hmm
Yeah.
Yeah, I love what you said about unlearning because I mentioned Kelvin earlier, and he teaches something called turning within meditation. And I started off with contemplative prayer many years ago because I was coming out of the Christian tradition. So I was
Mhm.
doing that and I tried different things. And so he was like, I have this method called turning within, which is based on TM because he was a TM teacher. And it was kind of like, I'm like, okay, so I don't do this. No, you don't do that. I don't do this. And I'm not supposed to have any expectations and don't say this one was good and that one was bad and I'm like, so what do I do now? And he's like, you don't have to do any. Stop trying. It's very difficult for people like that have tried to study and we want to do it right. Am I doing it right?
Look, if I tell you to have no expectations, it's like telling you not, please do not think of a blue rhinoceros. Okay.
Right, right.
You're gonna be looking, yeah, but the point is not to let go of well, yes, in the end, the idea is to let go of expecting, but the immediate idea is to notice what expectations you have.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay. I'm trying to meditate, but I'm expecting to feel calm and peaceful. Okay. There's an expectation. You don't have to go any further with it. You don't have to beat it down into the ground and come up with a good analysis of why it's wrong. You just have to see it. That's what I mean by knowing yourself. You
Hmm.
just see that that expectation is there. We see the judgments. Oh, I'm no good at this. I'm stupid. It's a judgment. Okay. As soon as you say that, as soon as you label it, then you labeling is the antidote to taking things personally. Okay. So I have all these expectations, so I'm messing up. This meditation is no good.
Hmm.
Okay. If I believe that, if I sit with that, then I've lost an opportunity. If I can take that and say, okay, that's my expectation, that's what I learned from this, then that's the practice of mindfulness. Now you're moving forward. Now instead of taking it personally, you've now objectified it. You've taken it out of your mind. It's not who you are, it's just a thought passing through your mind that you can let go.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really, really big thing I've gotten from meditation is understanding that I am not my thoughts
Mhm.
and that I don't have to chase my thoughts. I don't have to let them, we get those thoughts in our mind that run on a loop and we can't figure out how to get rid of them. One of the things that's been really helpful for me in learning mindfulness is like, okay, that's a thought and I can choose to continue with that thought. Now, I can't stop thoughts because they come, and I can't choose which ones come up, but I can choose which ones I entertain. I tell people it's like if someone comes to your house and walks in the house, you don't have to let them stay. They might come in, but you can ask them to leave.
Yeah, that's basically what you're doing. You're running through an inventory of your mind. And
Hmm.
you're seeing what's going on in there. What's where does this lead? Okay. So I have this expectation. I want meditation to uh, put me at rest, put my mind at rest. I want to stop thinking about politics. Okay. I want to stop thinking about all the horrible stuff that's going on. If that is your expectation and you can see it, you've started to become free of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, completely. Because again, personal experience. I woke up this morning. I was like, I'm tired of thinking about this. I don't want to think about this first thing every morning, so I'm not going to.
Mhm.
Um, and also that realization you talked about being in the present moment. I think it's really we hear the words, and it took me a long time to really put it into practice. But we live so much of our life in the past. So I'm like, if I'm angry, I'm living in the past. If I'm
Mhm.
fearful, I'm living in the future. And
Mhm.
so when I catch that, I'm like, okay, like just like right now, it could be very easy to get caught up on what's going to happen because of what happened this morning, for example. But I don't know what's going to happen in the future. And so right now, I'm okay. And just doing that can bring us some peace even as we're going through difficult times.
Yeah. Yeah, because we spin everything. We can't help
Yes.
it. It's the way the mind is. So I get a bit of bad news this morning, and I'm thinking, well, that's bad. But where is that going to lead? Well, it's going to lead here, and then that's going to happen. And and supposing, okay, so I'm working myself up. This is not anyone else's fault. It's very easy for me to point and say, that's the media, or that's Donald Trump did that to me. No,
Hmm.
it's me doing it to myself.
Hmm.
And as soon as you accept that, you have power. Because if I know that I'm doing this, then that means I can change it.
Right.
As long as I'm blaming someone else and I think someone else is responsible, then I'm helpless. So that's very important.
Yeah,
Taking responsibility. Yeah.
I think so. And so again, I always like to bring it back to the practical. So for someone listening to this right now, if you're going through anxiety because of what's coming up, or what you perceive as coming up, just having that perception, just that little bit of separation, knowing that that's your mind doing that, right? Because we don't know what's going to happen, and you can choose to just say, I'm going to come back to this present moment. In this present moment, I'm okay. And I tell people, I think it's a great exercise. It just
Mhm.
always in this present moment right now, I'm sitting in my office. I'm warm. I'm fed. I have power. I'm
Mhm.
okay.
Mhm. Yeah. And we are.
Yeah.
for the time being. And of course, bad things might happen, but bad things might always happen.
Right.
They always do, as we both know.
Yeah.
But there's no point in, well, I hate to say it like that. There's no point worrying about the future. It's a sort of a throwaway expression
Yeah.
because yeah, that's logically true, but you're ignoring the fact of human psychology.
Well, it's funny because Jesus famously said that, take no thought for what you're gonna eat tomorrow, what you're gonna wear. So, and you can take that to an extreme, and that bypasses being a human. Because as a human, I do have to think about retirement. I do have to think about what I'm going to eat for dinner this evening, so I can take something out of the freezer, or whatever. So those teachings are meant to be a goal, but don't live your entire life in the future, which we can really get caught up in, and that's what I see people spinning out. You know,
Yeah,
this is going to happen in 3 years. I just know this is what's going to happen, and we're again. First of all, we're often we're wrong about it, but also from a practical point of view, what can I do about it? And I like to focus on, okay, this might happen. What can I do? And then I do what I can do, and then I let it go.
mhm. Yeah. Well, that's discipline, and that's what we're cultivating here. That's why we do this regularly, is to remind ourselves that this has to be done, and that I can do it. I have the
Hmm.
power to do it. Um, very famously, there's the core teaching of Buddhism is the fourfold path, and it's often called the Four Noble Truths, but I
Right.
don't think it's about truth. I think it's about practice.
Hmm.
Um, and the fourth part is simply to acknowledge what you've done. So part three is letting go. Part two is understanding what you're letting go of. And part one is seeing that there's something to let go of.
Hmm. Hmm.
So once you get to that third part that you've let go, you might think, well, that's it, I've done it. But no, you have to reinforce that knowledge. It's very important. I can let go. I just did it, and I'm going to do it again. And you have to keep reminding yourself of that. Otherwise, you'll forget. I don't know why. That's just the way we're made. We focus on we focus much more on immediate challenges and threats than we do on strengths and deep inner integrity.
I
It's the way we're built. We've got to respect our biology.
Right.
At the same time, knowing that we have this incredible gift as human beings to actually change our behavior and change the way we perceive things.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating, and I've thought about this for a long time, and I've come to the conclusion, and you've said it, it's biology. Our brains are designed to keep us alive. Our brains are designed to seek out danger, to make sure that we stay away from the tiger, that we're always on edge. So that's the way biology is designed. But we do have this beautiful mind that we've been given that we can use to um, and we can't control it, but we can use it. It can become a tool, right? As
Yeah.
opposed to it just running us around, which is what it's doing for most people.
Yeah. We see it in animals. I don't actually live in Montreal. I live just outside in the country. So I look out my window and I see squirrels and foxes and things all day long. And um, sometimes I just sit, and this is another form of meditation. I just sit there and I look and I think, I wonder what it's like to be that squirrel.
Hmm.
And it's not difficult. You just take the time to do it, and you put your mind in there, and you see he's looking around all the time. He's scared. He's nervous. He's under threat.
Hmm.
Okay, he's under threat. What's that like? Well, 24/7, basically, yeah.
Yeah,
He's in a state of constant anxiety.
yeah, yeah.
And most animals, not all animals, lions aren't, but there's only the ones at the top of the heap that don't have to worry about that. So that's understanding of how we can be, how we are in many ways. That animalistic brain, that the brain stem is right there,
Right,
same
right.
as the squirrel. But we've got this other stuff up here, and we can use it to make tons of money and to put other people down and to glorify ourselves, or we can use it to make the world a better place. It's our choice. But to choose the right things, to choose or take a moral stance and to build it and to learn from experience, to fall flatten our faces and to get up again, um, that's the work. It takes courage. It takes energy. Mindfulness is not enough by itself. You have to activate it. You have to reinforce it. It has to come from somewhere, some deep well inside you.
Mm.
There has to be a deep craving, almost a lust, for something more, something clearer. That's what can really propel us to true transformation.
Yeah,
And it's within our power. It's not magical.
absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
Steve, we're coming to the end of our time. If you could remind people of the names of your books. I know you have there's a Zoom meeting and where people can reach you.
Well, my website is mindfulnesslive.ca, or you can go to schettini.com. It's the same website, and you'll learn all about what I offer right there. And you can contact me through the website. Mindfulness Live runs Monday, Wednesdays, Fridays at 12 noon Eastern Time for half an hour. If you can't come, you can listen to the recording. Um, Come and give it a try. Just send me an email and I'll give you a free trial, no problem. And I welcome anyone who really wants to commit to a formal meditation practice. Um, it's as simple as that. I'm also teaching courses from time to time, and you'll find that on the website too.
All right, awesome. Well, it was really good to talk to you today. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you very much, Brian.
All right, have a good afternoon.
You too.